Hello there, and welcome to the Sleep Porch. Tonight we'll be exploring the fascinating and emerging new world of renewable energy. A place filled by sunlight, moving air, flowing water, and the deep warmth of the earth itself. This is a world where rooftops become power plants, oceans whisper electricity into the grid, and invisible systems hum gently in the background, reshaping how our planet breathes and rests. If this content interests you, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to continue creating more meaningful videos. Renewable energy is not just about technology. It is about timing, balance, patience, and learning to listen to forces that have surrounded us for as long as life has existed. As we explore this subject together, you may begin to sense how vast and interconnected it truly is. Touching cities and coastlines, homes and hospitals, quiet villages and glowing skylines. It is a story of human curiosity meeting natural rhythm, of clever ideas unfolding at the same pace as sunrise and tide. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do but settle in. Let your shoulders soften, your breathing slow, and your thoughts ease. Allow your body to grow heavy and your mind to wander calmly as we explore this endlessly fascinating world together. Let's begin. Just 1 hour of the sunlight that reaches Earth provides enough power for all of humanity for an entire year. That single concept is what gives renewable energy an almost magical quality, because it begins with sheer scale. Our star pours an immense stream of photons onto the top of Earth's atmosphere, and only a tiny portion needs to be captured to transform everything. The true marvel is not that this resource exists, but that we have learned how to intercept it using thin sheets of silicon, quiet mirrors, and clever electronics that convert light into useful work. It helps to imagine it in physical terms. When solar panels are spread across parking areas, rooftops, warehouses, and the unused margins of highways, you are not so much creating a new energy source as redirecting a small share of what is already arriving. The challenge then becomes one of design, materials, storage, and fairness, rather than scarcity. The sky delivers this supply each morning on schedule, without invoices. A single modern wind turbine can provide power for thousands of homes. Stand at the base of one, and it feels like a monument to something unseen. High above, the blades sweep through air that appears empty, yet carries vast amounts of kinetic energy. The machine is constantly negotiating with the wind, yawing to face it, adjusting blade pitch like a bird changing its feathers, and feeding smooth electricity into the grid through power electronics. The size is not just for drama. Higher air is usually faster and steadier, so taller towers and longer blades harvest more reliable energy from the same landscape. Entire teams support each turbine. Technicians who climb inside the tower, sensor systems that detect vibration early, and control rooms that coordinate output across a whole fleet. Even the spacing of turbines becomes a science of wakes and weather. It is a reminder that wind power is really atmosphere power, harvested with patience, precision, and a touch of daring engineering. The cheapest electricity in many places is now coming from wind and solar. For decades, clean power was treated like a noble luxury, something you chose for ideals, not budgets. Then, learning curves quietly did their work. Every time factories doubled output, costs fell again, driven by improved manufacturing, better logistics, and experience gained from millions of installations. Competitive auctions began revealing a surprising truth. In region after region, developers offered long-term contracts at prices that traditional plants struggled to match, even before counting pollution or health costs. Part of the secret is that the fuel is free, so investors can lock in predictable costs instead of gambling on future coal, gas, or oil prices. Another part is speed. A project that breaks ground and starts earning sooner is less exposed to inflation and interest. When financiers, utilities, and households all notice the same pattern, momentum builds. What began as an environmental choice becomes a practical one, and economics turns into a powerful tailwind. Solar panels work even on cloudy days, just with less output. Clouds feel like a curtain, yet light is surprisingly persistent. Even when the sun is hidden, photons still scatter through the sky, arriving from all directions like a soft, bright fog. So cells do not require a sharp shadow on the ground. They require light, and diffuse daylight still carries plenty of it. This is why places famous for gray skies can still build thriving solar markets, especially when long summer days stretch the working hours of sunlight. Rain can even help by washing dust and pollen off panel surfaces, nudging performance back up afterward. Snow brings its own twist. Cold temperatures can improve electrical efficiency, and bright snowfields reflect extra light upward, giving panels an added boost when the angle is right. The deeper story is reliability. Solar output changes with weather, but those changes are measurable, forecastable, and manageable, turning a cloud problem into a planning problem. Some renewables produce electricity without moving parts, almost silently. There is something strangely soothing about power, made with no spinning shafts, no pistons, no roaring combustion. Photovoltaic panels are essentially solid-state electricity. Light excites electrons inside a carefully engineered material, and an electric current emerges without anything mechanical pushing it along. That simplicity can mean fewer points of wear, which is why solar systems can sit on rooftops for decades with modest maintenance. The quiet also changes how energy fits into daily life. A school can host panels above a playground. A warehouse can shade its roof while generating power. And a hospital can add capacity without adding noise. Even in remote places, a small array paired with batteries can replace the constant growl of the diesel generator, turning nights into something calmer. The magic is not only in the physics, but in the feeling. Electricity becomes less like an industrial event and more like a gentle background service delivered with the hush of daylight itself. Clean power can also clean air, preventing millions of pollution-related illnesses. Energy choices show up in lungs. When coal and oil are burned, the sky carries the leftovers. Fine particles that slip deep into airways, nitrogen oxides that irritate tissue, and sulfur compounds that can form harmful haze. These pollutants are linked with asthma attacks, harp strain, strokes, and premature death, especially for children and older adults. Switching to renewables can reduce those exposures quickly, sometimes within weeks, because the source of the pollution is removed rather than filtered at the end. The effect is not evenly shared. which makes it even more important. Communities living near busy highways, refineries, or power plants often carry the heaviest burden. Cleaner electricity can mean fewer emergency visits, fewer missed school days, and more years of healthy life gained quietly and without fanfare. It is one of the most human benefits of the transition. The power grid becomes a public health tool, not just a machine. Renewable energy is now one of the fastest-growing job fields worldwide. One reason the shift feels so real is that you can see it in work boots and tool belts. Renewable energy creates jobs that are distributed, hands-on, and often local. Technicians servicing turbines, electricians wiring inverters, crews installing rooftop systems, engineers planning new transmission, and operators managing storage and smart grids. There is also factory work, from glass and frames to cables and batteries, plus the designers who make equipment more efficient each year. Many roles translate well from older industries, which matters in places where livelihoods have been tied to coal, oil, or gas for generations. Skills like welding, heavy equipment operation, safety planning, and grid maintenance do not vanish. They shift. Training programs and apprenticeships can turn that shift into a bridge instead of a cliff. The hopeful part is momentum. As costs drop and deployment accelerates, demand for skilled labor grows with it. The energy transition is not only a technology story, it is a workforce story, unfolding one job site at a time. Grids can run on near-total renewables, using storage, flexibility, and smart planning. A renewable heavy grid is less like a single power plant and more like an orchestra. Instead of one conductor forcing the same rhythm all day, the system blends many instruments. Wind arriving in gusts, solar rising and falling with the sun, hydro responding quickly, batteries smoothing the edges, and demand shifting slightly to match supply. Places that have pushed far in this direction show what is possible when planning is careful. Fast forecasting helps operators anticipate changes. Interconnections let regions share power across distance and time zones. Storage covers short gaps, while flexible industrial loads and smart charging for electric vehicles can move demand to cheaper, cleaner hours. Even simple choices help, like aligning building efficiency with weather patterns. The underlying lesson is that reliability is not tied to one fuel. It is tied to coordination. When the grid becomes smarter about timing and cooperation, a high renewables future stops sounding like a gamble and starts looking like engineering policy and good choreography working together. Renewable power can be built faster than most fossil fuel plants. Speed matters, because the world changes while projects are still on the drawing board. Large fossil plants often require complex fuel supply contracts, specialized equipment, long construction schedules, and the risk that future regulations or market shifts will strand the investment. Many renewable projects are modular, which changes everything. A solar farm can scale from a small phase to a large one quickly, adding rows of panels like building blocks. Wind projects can arrive turbine by turbine, and each new machine begins producing as soon as it is commissioned. That shorter timeline reduces financing risk and allows communities to see benefits sooner, including local tax revenue and lease payments. It also lets grids respond quickly to rising demand from electrification, data centers, or growing cities. Fast build times do not remove the need for careful siting and permitting, but they do reshape what is possible. When energy can be deployed in months instead of years, planning becomes more agile, and momentum becomes easier to sustain. Your rooftop can become a tiny power station, feeding energy back. There is something wonderfully empowering about the idea that your home can participate in the grid rather than just consume from it. Rooftop solar turns empty surface area into a generator that works hardest during the bright hours when demand often climbs. With the right policies and wiring, excess electricity can flow outward, supporting neighbors and easing strain on distant power plants. Pair it with a battery, and the home becomes even more flexible, storing midday production for evening lights or keeping essential devices running during outages. When many houses do this together, utilities can bundle them into a TU, virtual power plant, coordinating thousands of small systems to behave like one large, responsive resource that changes the geography of power. Electricity no longer has to travel as far, which can reduce losses and delay expensive upgrades. It also changes the psychology. Energy stops feeling like something made somewhere else. It becomes something you can see, plan for, and quietly be proud of every time the sun rises. Solar farms can share land with sheep, creating solar grazing partnerships. Picture a solar site that feels more like a calm pasture than an industrial project. Sheep are surprisingly perfect co-workers for panels because they naturally keep grass trimmed without needing loud mowers or chemical weed control. Their small size lets them move under rows of panels where bigger animals would bump and scratch equipment. For farmers, it can mean two income streams from the same land, one from grazing and one from electricity, which is a rare kind of stability in a weather-driven business. For solar operators, it solves a real maintenance headache. Vegetation that grows too tall can shade panels and attract pests. Yet constant mowing costs money and burns fuel. With grazing, the landscape becomes self-managing, and the site stays quieter and greener. In some communities, these projects also soften opposition by keeping land agricultural rather than turning it into a fenced, lifeless field. It is clean power that still smells like grass. Floating solar panels reduce evaporation while making electricity on reservoirs. A reservoir looks like open space, but it is also a valuable surface doing nothing most days but losing water to heat and wind. Floating solar turns that same surface into a double-purpose asset. Panels sit on buoyant platforms that gently rise and fall with water levels, sending power ashore through protected cables. The shade can slow evaporation, which matters in dry regions where every drop is contested by farms, cities, and ecosystems. Cooler water can also reduce algae blooms in some situations, improving water quality and cutting treatment costs. There is another clever advantage. Reservoirs already have nearby electrical infrastructure, especially if they are tied to water management or hydropower systems. So interconnection can be simpler than starting from scratch on land. It also avoids using farmland or habitat. The image is quietly futuristic. A lake that glitters not with waves alone, but with a floating constellation that makes electricity while helping save water. Concentrated solar plants can store heat in molten salts for night power. Instead of turning light directly into electricity, concentrated solar gathers sunlight like a giant magnifying glass. Fields of mirrors track the sun and bounce its rays toward a receiver, heating a working fluid to extreme temperatures. The twist that feels almost like alchemy is what comes next. Storing that heat in molten salts hot enough to glow, yet stable enough to hold energy for hours. When the sun sets, the stored heat is used to make steam that spins a turbine, producing electricity long after the sky has gone dark. It is solar power that behaves more like a controllable power plant, able to deliver into evening peaks when people cook dinner and turn on lights. The engineering has drama in it too, because everything must be designed to avoid freezing, corrosion, and leaks while handling tremendous heat. It is sunlight bottled as warmth, waiting patiently for night. Solar panels in space could beam power down as microwaves someday. On Earth, solar energy takes breaks. Nights arrive, clouds drift in, seasons tilt the sun. In space, the sunlight is far more constant, and that steadiness is what makes the idea so captivating. A space-based solar system would collect energy above the atmosphere, then convert it into a beam directed toward a receiving station on the ground. The beam could be microwaves or laser light, carefully spread out so the intensity stays within safe limits, and then turned back into electricity by special antennas called rectennas. It sounds like science fiction, yet research has been circling this concept for decades, and small demonstrations have helped show pieces of the puzzle. The hard part is not the physics as much as the logistics. Launching large structures, assembling them reliably, and keeping costs reasonable is the true mountain to climb. If those hurdles fall, it would be a new kind of power plant, one that rises with the stars. Perovskite solar cells can be printed like ink if durability is solved. Perovskites are exciting because they promise a different personality for solar power. Instead of rigid panels made in energy-hungry factories, these materials can be deposited in thin layers, potentially using roll-to-roll processes that resemble printing newspapers, that could make solar lighter, cheaper, and far more adaptable, with coatings that go onto flexible sheets or shaped surfaces. The performance story is just as thrilling. In a relatively short research timeline, perovskite efficiencies climbed at a pace that startled the industry, hinting that sunlight could be captured with less material and less cost. The obstacle is endurance. Sunlight, oxygen, moisture, and heat can slowly break the material down, like a beautiful painting left out in the rain. Researchers are fighting back with better encapsulation, improved chemistry, and layered designs that pair perovskites with silicon for extra output. If they win, solar could spread into places panels never fit before, turning more of the built world into a gentle generator. Some solar panels are semi-transparent, turning windows into generators. Imagine standing in a sunlit room where the glass is quietly doing work. Semi-transparent solar aims to harvest part of the light while still letting enough through for people to see and feel daylight. Some designs capture invisible wavelengths like ultraviolet or near-infrared, guiding that energy toward the window edges where tiny cells convert it into electricity. Others use patterned layers that look slightly tinted, like designer glass that happens to make power. The appeal is scale. Cities are full of vertical surfaces, and a single high-rise can have more glass than roof. If even a portion of those windows could contribute electricity, buildings would shift from being pure consumers to being partial producers. The challenge is finding the sweet spot between transparency, efficiency, cost, and aesthetics, because a building still needs comfortable light and clear views. There is also a poetic side. Sunlight that once just warmed a lobby can help run elevators, power sensors, or charge devices, making the boundary between outside and inside feel more alive. Desert dust can slash solar output, making cleaning a major design challenge. So the deserts look perfect from a distance, all that sun and open space, yet the environment fights back in a quiet, gritty way. Dust and sand settle onto panels, forming a film that blocks light like a thin veil. In extreme conditions, output can drop dramatically, and the problem compounds because dusty air can also coat sensors and cooling vents. Cleaning sounds simple until you consider the scale. A large solar plant can cover an area you could walk all day, and hauling water to scrub panels may clash with the reality of living in an arid region. That has sparked a wave of creativity. Robotic cleaners that move at night, coatings that resist sticking, electrostatic systems that shake dust loose, and designs that reduce how much grit can settle in the first crash. Place. There is a deeper lesson here about renewable energy being rooted in the local environment. Sunlight alone is not sufficient. You also need to understand wind, soil, water, and upkeep so the technology can genuinely belong to its setting. Solar trackers follow the sun and can raise energy output significantly. A fixed panel is like a face that looks in one direction all day long. A tracker is a face that turns. By pivoting along the sun's path, trackers keep panels aligned closer to the optimal angle for capturing light, especially in the morning and late afternoon when fixed systems begin to lag. The outcome can be a noticeable increase in yearly energy production, which is why trackers are now common in large, ground-mounted installations. The mechanism itself can be basic or complex. Some systems rotate on a single axis, like a slow nod from east to west. Others tilt along two axes, following the sun with greater precision. That added movement brings higher cost and more maintenance, but it can also reshape the daily power curve, extending production into the evening hours when demand often climbs. In a way, trackers are about respect for geometry. The sun is not just bright, it is directional. And an array that moves can treat that direction like a resource. It is a reminder that renewable energy is not only about what you capture, but when you capture it. Solar power helped electrify remote clinics before many cities had stable grids. In remote regions, electricity is not a convenience. It is the difference between a safe birth and a risky one, between refrigerated vaccines and spoiled medicine, between a working radio and silence. Long before solar became a mainstream grid resource, small photovoltaic systems were often used where the alternative was darkness, or a generator that needed fuel delivered over rough roads. A few panels and the battery could power lights for nighttime treatment, charge communication equipment, and run basic medical devices. It also made water purification possible, which can matter as much as medicine. The impact is easy to overlook because it arrives quietly. A clinic that no longer worries about fuel shipments can focus on care. A nurse who can see clearly at night can work more confidently. Solar's real gift here is reliability through independence. When power is made on-site, distance stops being a barrier. This is renewable energy as a lifeline, not a trend, and it shows how clean technology often proves itself first at the edges of the map. The first practical silicon solar cell appeared in the mid-20th century. A practical silicon cell was not born from a single flash of genius. It emerged from decades of tinkering with materials, impurities, and the strange behavior of electrons in solids. What made that mid-century mast special was not only that it worked, but that it worked well enough to be useful, turning sunlight into electricity with a reliability that could be scaled. Early uses were often niche because the cost was high. Yet the value was undeniable in places where replacing a battery was difficult or impossible. Spacecraft became an early proving ground because sunlight is abundant above the atmosphere, and every watt matters when you are far from home. Over time, manufacturing improved, prices fell, and that once rare device became familiar. appearing on calculators, road signs, and rooftops. The bigger story is how quickly human tools can evolve when a principle is proven. A thin slice of silicon became a bridge between star and socket, and the modern energy landscape grew from that quiet breakthrough. Wind speeds rise with height, which is why turbines keep growing taller. Step outside on a calm day, and the air can feel almost still, especially near trees, buildings, and hills that roughen the flow. Climb higher, and the story changes. With fewer obstacles to slow it down, moving air becomes smoother and faster. And that extra speed matters enormously, because the available energy rises sharply with wind speed. Taller towers are like reaching up into a better river current. That is why modern machines look so statuesque, with hubs lifted far above the turbulence close to the ground. The payoff is not only more energy, but more predictable energy, which makes planning easier for the grid. Of course, height brings challenges too. Transporting enormous sections, assembling them safely, and designing for lightning and fatigue pushes engineering to its limits. Still, the logic is irresistible. When the atmosphere offers a stronger stream just a little higher, humans build ladders to meet it. Offshore wind is stronger and steadier, turning seas into power fields. Out at sea, wind has room to gather itself. Without forests and city blocks to break it apart, air flows in long, clean currents that can persist for hours. That steadiness is a gift because it smooths power output and makes forecasting easier, like switching from a jittery candle flame to a steady lantern. Offshore sites also open up vast new areas for development, which can ease land conflicts and keep turbines farther from homes. The scale can be breathtaking. Rows of machines rise from the water like a moving skyline, each one harvesting energy that once only drove waves and weather. Building in the ocean is not gentle work. Salt corrosion, eye waves, and limited access demand rugged designs and careful maintenance plans. Yet, the payoff is a resource that often peaks at times when coastal cities need power most, especially during strong seasonal winds. The sea becomes a quiet partner in electrifying the shore. Floating wind turbines can harvest energy in deep water far offshore. Traditional offshore turbines need the seafloor within reach for foundations, which limits where you can build. Floating designs break that boundary. Instead of anchoring rigidly to the bottom, the turbine sips on a buoyant platform, held in place by mooring lines that flex with waves and currents. It is a little like a ship that never sails, constantly balancing weight, wind push, and water motion. This opens access to deep water regions where winds can be even stronger and where coastal shelves drop away quickly. It also spreads development options, allowing countries with steep coastlines to tap offshore wind without waiting for shallow sites. The engineering is a dance between stability and movement. The plug must stay calm enough for the blades and generator to operate efficiently, yet strong enough to survive storms that can be ferocious far from land. If done well, it turns distant, windy horizons into reliable electricity. One wind farm can wake up sleeping fish habitats by limiting trolling. A wind farm does more than produce electricity. It also changes how humans use the sea around it. In many places, the presence of turbines and cables restricts certain types of fishing, especially heavy bottom trolling that scrapes the sea floor. When that pressure eases, habitats can begin to recover. Seagrasses may spread, shellfish beds can settle, and small fish get more hiding places, which can ripple upward through the food web. The turbine foundations themselves can act like artificial reefs, giving surfaces for barnacles, mussels, and seaweeds to cling to, in waters that were once mostly open sand. That new structure can attract larger fish, which in turn draw seals and seabirds. It is not automatically positive everywhere, and careful planning matters to avoid harming sensitive areas. Still, it is a fascinating twist. A project built for energy can accidentally create pockets of refuge, letting marine life breathe a little easier in busy waters. Turbine blades can be longer than a football field is wide. A wind turbine's blade is not just big. It is a carefully sculpted wing, stretched to an astonishing length, designed to sip energy from a moving fluid with minimal waste. The reason for going long is simple and powerful. A longer blade sweeps a larger circle, and that larger swept area captures more of the wind's energy, even when the breeze is modest. These blades are feats of material science. They must be light enough to spin efficiently, stiff enough to avoid bending into the tower, and tough enough to endure years of gusts, hail, and fatigue. Manufacturing them involves giant molds, precise layering, and quality checks that can feel closer to aerospace than construction. Then comes the journey. Moving a blade down roads and around corners can become a logistical adventure, sometimes requiring special vehicles and group planning. In the end, those sweeping arcs high in the sky are the reason the wind farm can feel so powerful from so far away. Wind power forecasting uses weather models like a specialized storm prediction. Wind power becomes far more valuable when you can predict it, because electricity systems must balance supply and demand every moment. Forecasting turns the atmosphere into something like a scheduled delivery, not a surprise. Operators use advanced weather models that simulate pressure, temperature, and airflow, then refine them with local measurements from turbines, meteorological masts, and even remote sensing tools like LAR. The forecasts are updated constantly because the sky is always changing. A front arriving earlier than expected, or a stable layer of air forming overnight, can shift generation by a meaningful amount. Good forecasting helps grids decide when to charge batteries, when to ramp other resources, and how much power to trade between regions. It also reduces waste. With better predictions, fewer turbines need to be curtailed, and fewer backup plants need to idle. There's something quietly beautiful about it. The same mathematics used to anticipate storms and sea breezes is also guiding electrons through cables, turning weather into a planned part of modern life. New blade designs can reduce noise while improving energy capture. For a machine that can stand taller than many buildings, a turbine can be surprisingly polite. Still, noise matters, especially at night in rural places where silence is part of the landscape. Engineers have learned that much of the sound comes from airflow at the trailing edges of blades, where turbulence can create a soft washing. New designs borrow ideas from nature, including serrated edges inspired by owl feathers, which help break up the turbulence and reduce sound without sacrificing performance. Other tweaks refine blade shape to maintain smooth lift across a wider range of wind speeds, improving energy capture while keeping the motion graceful. Control systems also help adjusting blade pitch and rotational speed to reduce noise during sensitive hours. The result is a kind of compromise between physics and community comfort. A wind farm that is quieter is easier to welcome, and one that captures more energy from the same wind becomes more efficient. It is a reminder that renewable technology evolves not only toward more power, but toward better neighbors. Turbines can be shut down briefly to protect migrating birds. Wind energy shares the sky, so responsible wind energy pays attention to wings. Many bird species follow seasonal migration routes, and certain weather conditions can bring large numbers through a turbine area in a short window. Instead of accepting that risk, some wind farms use targeted strategies that can dramatically reduce collisions. Radar, cameras, and trained observers can detect high-risk moments, and turbines can be slowed or stopped for brief periods. The key is timing. A short pause during a peak movement can offer protection while preserving most annual energy production. This approach works especially well when paired with smart siting that avoids major flyways and nesting areas in the first place. There is also ongoing work with better lighting and blade visibility to reduce confusion for birds. It is easy to imagine clean energy as automatically harmless, but the more honest story is better. Good solutions come from care, monitoring, and small sacrifices made at the right moment. The wind keeps blowing and the birds keep traveling. Wind and solar often complement each other across seasons and time. One of the happiest surprises in renewable planning is that different resources can cover for one another. Solar tends to peak in the middle of the day, especially in clear summer weather. Wind, depending on region, can be stronger in the evening, overnight, or during cooler seasons when storms and pressure systems are more active. That means the combined output can be smoother than either source alone, like two musicians taking turns carrying the melody. On a hot afternoon, solar can shoulder the load when air conditioners are working hardest. Later, as the sun drops, wind can rise and keep electricity flowing into the evening. This natural teamwork reduces the amount of storage needed and can make grids easier to operate. It also spreads risk. A cloudy day does not necessarily mean a low wind day, and a calm day does not always mean weak sunlight. The deeper lesson is that renewable energy is not a single technology. It is a portfolio, and portfolios are resilient because they do not depend on one kind of weather behaving perfectly. Wind energy's fuel arrives free, delivered by the atmosphere. Most power plants depend on supply chains, trains of coal, pipelines of gas, ships of oil. Wind arrives without invoices, without borders, and without refueling schedules. Once a turbine is built, the main costs are maintenance, financing, and the careful work of operating it safely. That changes the economics in a way that can feel almost liberating. A community that invests in wind is less exposed to fuel price spikes that can ripple through household bills. It also changes the geopolitics of energy. Countries with strong wind resources have something valuable that cannot be embargoed or exhausted by drilling. Yet free fuel does not mean effortless energy. You still need land agreements, grid connections, wildlife protections, and skilled technicians. The wind itself can be moody, arriving in pulses and seasons that require smart planning. Still, there is a quiet wonder in the idea. The planet's own circulation, driven by sunlight and spinning Earth, is constantly moving vast amounts of energy around. Turbines take only a small share, then allow the air to continue on its way. Hydropower stands among the oldest sources of renewable electricity on Earth. Long before the idea of power grids existed, people were already drawing energy from moving water. Ancient water wheels spun grinding stones, cut timber, and lifted water for irrigation, revealing a simple truth. Gravity can perform work if you give it a root. When electricity emerged, this same principle expanded. Rivers became living engines, spinning turbines that could illuminate streets and operate factories far from coal sources. There is a particular romance in this system because the fuel itself is the landscape. Snowmelt, rainfall, and mountain slopes all become part of the machine. Even the sound of water rushing over a spillway suggests stored potential energy being set free. Hydropower also taught early engineers how to synchronize generators, control frequency, and transmit electricity to distant towns. In many countries, it became the first large-scale renewable energy source people relied on every day, quietly tying weather and seasons to the lights glowing in their homes. Pumped storage hydropower is like a giant water battery for grids. Imagine having a way to save extra electricity without storing it as electricity. Pumped storage does exactly that, by turning spare power into elevation. When there is more electricity than the grid needs, pumps push water uphill into a higher reservoir. Later, when demand rises, the same water is released back down through turbines, returning energy on command. The beauty is in the scale and the simplicity. Water is heavy, and height is a reliable vault. This is why pumped storage can support a grid through evening peaks, sudden generator outages, or windy nights when demand is low. It is also a time machine for renewable energy, moving clean power from when it is abundant to when it is valuable. Designing a site is a careful puzzle of geography, environmental protection, and civil engineering. When done well, it becomes the grid's quiet backbone, storing stability in plain sight, tucked into valleys and hillsides like a secret reservoir of calm. Small rune of river hydro can generate power with smaller reservoirs. Not every hydro project needs a giant lake behind a massive wall. Run-of-river systems work by using the natural flow of a river, with little or no large storage, dividing water through a channel or pentock to a turbine, and then returning it downstream. Because the river keeps moving, the project can be smaller in footprint and sometimes gentler on surrounding land. The trade-off is that generation follows the river's mood. Spring melt can be generous, while dry seasons can be lean, which makes careful planning essential. Still, these projects can bring reliable electricity to regions where big dams are not practical or welcome. They can also be designed to fit into existing infrastructure, such as old mill sites or water diversion canals, giving new life to places where water has been managed for generations. It is hydropower in a quieter voice, working with a river's rhythm rather than rewriting the whole valley. Hydropower can respond in seconds, helping stabilize electricity frequency. Electric grids have a heartbeat called frequency, and it needs to stay steady, even as millions of people switch devices on and off. Hydropower is famous for being quick on its feet. When demand rises suddenly, operators can open gates and increase water flow through turbines rapidly, adding power fast enough to keep the grid's rhythm from wobbling. That speed makes hydro a valuable partner for variable renewables because it can cover short-lived dips and surges without the slow ramp of some other generators. In practical terms, it can mean fewer blackouts and less wear on the grid, especially during heat waves or cold snaps when demand spikes unpredictably. The control room side of this is fascinating too. Operators watch real-time signals and adjust water releases with precision, balancing electricity needs with river constraints and safety. It is like having a musician who can instantly match tempo, keeping the whole orchestra together when the crowd suddenly starts clapping faster. New fish-friendly turbines, aim to reduce harm during downstream migration. Rivers are highways for life, and turbines can be dangerous intersections. Many fish migrate downstream at certain life stages, and passing through traditional turbines can cause injury from pressure changes, blade strikes, or turbulence. Fish-friendly turbine designs try to make that journey safer by reshaping blades, slowing rotational speeds, and smoothing water passage so the experience is less violent. Some approaches also guide fish away from turbines entirely, using screens, bypass channels, or behavioral cues that steer them towards safer routes. What makes this work so interesting is that it blends biology with engineering. Designers must understand how fish sense flow, light, and sound, then translate that into hardware that can operate reliably for decades. Success is measured not only in megawatt, but in survival rates and healthier populations. It is a reminder that renewable energy does not get a free pass. The best projects earn their place by becoming better neighbors to the ecosystems they rely on. Sediment buildup can shorten dam lifespans, reshaping river engineering. Rivers do not just carry water, they carry mountains in slow motion, transporting sand, silt, and gravel downstream year after year. When a dam slows a river, that sediment can settle out, gradually filling the reservoir like a bathtub that never fully drains. Over time, storage capacity shrinks. Turbines may face abrasive particles, and downstream habitats can be starved of the sediments that build deltas and beaches. This is not a small detail. Sediment management can determine whether a dam remains useful for a century or becomes a costly problem much sooner. Engineers respond with creative strategies, flushing flows timed to high water, sediment bypass tunnels that send material around the dam, dredging in critical areas, and new designs that consider sediment from the corpse start. It turns hydropower into a long-term relationship with geology. A successful project is not just built. It is maintained in partnership with the river's constant effort to reshape the land. Some dams now add solar on their reservoirs to share grid connections. A hydropower reservoir already has something that new energy projects often struggle to obtain: access to transmission. That makes it an attractive place to add floating solar, creating a hybrid site that can generate power in different ways without duplicating grid infrastructure. The pairing can be surprisingly complementary. Solar production tends to be strong during sunny days, while hydro can be held back slightly, conserving water for times when sunlight fades or demand rises. In some cases, the Soma shade can also reduce surface heating and help limit evaporation, which can be valuable during dry spells. The engineering challenge is making floating platforms durable and keeping cables safe while ensuring navigation, wildlife, and recreation are respected. The bigger idea is efficiency of space and wires. Instead of building a brand new project with brand new lines, the reservoir becomes a shared energy hub. It is a modern layer added onto an older system, like upgrading a familiar tool to do more without expanding its footprint. Microhydro can power a village using a stream you could step over. Some of the most charming energy systems are the ones that feel almost handmade. Microhydro can use a small drop in elevation and a modest flow to generate steady electricity for a community, sometimes with equipment small enough to fit in a shed. The secret is not a huge river, but consistent water and clever placement. A simple intake guides part of the stream into a pipe, gravity accelerates it downhill, and the compact turbine spins a generator before the water returns to the stream. Because the power can run continuously, it can be especially useful for lighting, refrigeration, and charging in places where solar would require large batteries for nighttime needs. These systems also encourage local ownership. When the equipment is understandable and maintainable by trained residents, it can stay reliable for years with pride and care. Microhydro is not about dominating nature. It is about finding a small, steady opportunity in the landscape and letting it quietly support daily life. Hydropower output can swing with droughts, revealing climate risk. Clearly, hydropower depends on the water cycle, so it becomes a kind of climate instrument.
In wet years, reservoirs refill and rivers surge, and generation can be abundant. In drought years, the limits become visible. Water levels drop, flows shrink, and difficult choices appear because the same water may be needed for drinking supplies, irrigation, ecosystems, and electricity. That tension makes hydropower both valuable and vulnerable. It can provide flexible power when water is available, but it also exposes how climate shifts can ripple into energy security. This is why some regions are rethinking planning associations that once treated historical river flows as dependable. Better forecasting, diversified renewable mixes, and smarter water management are becoming part of the solution. There is also an honesty to this vulnerability. Unlike fuels pulled from underground, hydropower cannot pretend to be separate from the atmosphere. It forces a conversation about resilience, conservation, and how societies share scarce resources when the weather does not cooperate. Tidal barges can also act as storm surge protection in some places. A tidal barrage is a bold idea. Build a barrier across an estuary so the rise and fall of the sea can drive turbines. But a structure that controls water levels can sometimes serve another purpose too, helping manage storm surges that push seawater inland during severe weather. In certain locations, a barrage can be designed with gates that close under dangerous conditions, reducing flooding risk for communities along the shore. That dual role makes the project feel less like a single-purpose power plant and more like coastal infrastructure. Of course, it comes with serious trade-offs. Estuaries are rich ecosystems, and changing tidal patterns can affect sediment movement, habitats, and water quality. Any storm protection benefit must be weighed against ecological cost with great care and long-term monitoring. Still, the concept is fascinating because it treats energy and safety as linked challenges. The ocean's motion can be both threat and resource, and a well-designed system tries to respect that complexity while offering protection as well as power.
Geothermal taps Earth's internal heat, essentially ancient energy still leaking out. Beneath your feet, the planet is quietly warm, not from sunlight, but from deep history. Some of that heat is left over from Earth's formation, when gravity and collisions compressed matter into a glowing beginning. Some is continually replenished by the slow decay of naturally occurring radioactive elements in the crust and mantle. Together, they create a steady upward flow of heat that never truly stops. Geothermal energy is the art of finding places where that heat is easiest to reach, often where water can circulate through hot rock and return as steam or hot brine. Then the surface becomes a doorway to the interior. Wells, pipes, and turbines translate that hidden warmth into electricity or direct heating.
What makes it so captivating is the timescale. You are not borrowing yesterday's sunshine or last season's rainfall. You are borrowing a tiny trickle of the planet's own deep energy, the faint echo of processes older than any ocean or mountain range you have ever seen. Geothermal plants can run day and night like steady baseload power.
Some energy sources arrive in waves, but geothermal can feel like a constant heartbeat. Because the heat comes from underground reservoirs that do not care about clouds or calm winds, a well-managed geothermal plant can produce electricity around the clock with impressive consistency. That steadiness makes it valuable in a grid that includes more variable sources, because it provides a dependable foundation that operators can count on. The story is not only about reliability, but about clever control.
Operators monitor reservoir pressure, fluid chemistry, and the balance between extraction and reinjection to keep the system healthy for decades. In a sense, it is like managing a living spring. Take too much and it weakens. Handle it thoughtfully and it becomes a long-term partner. The result is electricity that feels almost quiet in its confidence. No dramatic ramping, no waiting for the weather. Just a steady flow of power drawn from the planet's warmth, helping keep lights on through nights, winters, and stormy weeks. Iceland warms many of its homes with hot water drawn directly from the Earth. There, the planet itself functions like an enormous boiler. Geothermal activity beneath the surface causes hot water to rise naturally in many areas, and that heat is captured and distributed through district heating systems that feel almost miraculous in such a cold environment. Rather than each household burning its own fuel, entire neighborhoods are heated by a shared network of pipes carrying geothermal water, often using heat exchangers to pass warmth safely and efficiently. The outcome is a nation where winter comfort is closely linked to geology. You can see it in steam lifting from sidewalks, in outdoor pools that remain welcoming even when snow falls, and in the sense that energy security is local and resilient. This is not just practical, it shapes culture. When heat is plentiful, public bathing becomes a social rhythm, and greenhouses can grow food in places you would never expect. Iceland's example reveals that renewable energy can be more than electricity. It can become a daily companion, transforming how a society lives alongside its climate. Enhanced geothermal systems could work in many more regions if proven. Traditional geothermal depends on finding the right natural combination of heat, water, and permeable rock, which limits where it can be built. Enhanced geothermal aims to change that by creating a reservoir where nature did not provide one. The idea is bold. Drill deep into hot rock, then use carefully controlled methods to increase the rock's permeability so water can circulate, absorb heat, and return to the surface. If it works at scale, geothermal could become far more widespread, turning underground heat into a resource for many countries, not just those with obvious hot springs. The excitement comes with real challenges. Drilling deep is expensive, and managing induced seismicity requires careful monitoring and responsible site choices. Yet the prize is enormous. A reliable, weather-independent, renewable source that could be deployed near cities and industries would reshape energy planning. It would mean heat and electricity drawn from almost anywhere with deep, hot rock, which is much of the world. It is the dream of geothermal becoming truly universal. Geothermal can be used directly for greenhouses, pools, and district heating. Sometimes the most elegant energy use is the simplest one. If you already have hot water from the ground, you do not need to convert it to electricity and then back to heat. You can use the warmth directly. That can mean greenhouses that grow tomatoes in winter, spa pools that stay warm without burning fuel, and district heating systems that deliver comfort to entire neighborhoods through insulated pipes. This is geothermal as a gentle service, quietly transforming daily life. In some towns, geothermal heat warms sidewalks or roads to reduce ice,
cutting salt use and improving safety. In agriculture, it can support fish farming or dry crops, letting local food systems become more resilient.
The atmosphere of these places can feel almost enchanted, with steam rising in cold air from sources that never ignite. It also shows a bigger lesson about efficiency. Renewable energy is not only about generating more, it is about using what you have with fewer steps, fewer losses, and more thoughtful design. Direct geothermal heat is a shortcut that the Earth offers willingly. Some geothermal fluids carry valuable minerals, turning power plants into mines. Geothermal brines are not just hot water. They can be chemically rich, carrying dissolved minerals picked up as fluid travels through rock under high temperature and pressure. That has sparked an intriguing possibility: using geothermal sites to produce both energy and valuable materials. In some locations, brines contain lithium and other elements important for batteries and modern electronics. Instead of digging new mines, engineers explore methods to extract minerals from circulating fluids, then return the brine underground so the reservoir remains stable. If done responsibly, it could reduce some environmental impacts of mining while creating new economic value from an existing energy project. The challenge is delicate. Extraction must be efficient, the chemistry must be managed to avoid scaling and corrosion, and ecosystems must be protected from any leaks. Still, the concept is thrilling. A power plant becomes a kind of subterranean refinery, drawing heat and materials from the same hidden source. It is an example of renewable energy evolving into multi-purpose infrastructure, where one well can serve several needs at once. Geothermal reservoirs can cool if overused, so careful management matters. Geothermal energy feels endless, but it is not a bottomless cup. A reservoir can lose heat locally if fluids are withdrawn too quickly, or if re-injection is poorly planned. Think of it like repeatedly scooping hot water from one corner of a bath. The whole bath is warm, but that corner cools faster than it can recover. Responsible geothermal development treats the underground reservoir as a system that needs balance. Operators re-inject fluids to maintain pressure and help transport heat from surrounding rock back toward production wells. They space wells strategically and monitor temperature trends over years, not weeks. Sometimes they rotate which wells are used more heavily, giving parts of the reservoir time to recover. This long-term stewardship is part of what makes geothermal fascinating. It is renewable, but not careless. It rewards patience and understanding of geology. When managed well, geothermal can provide decades of reliable energy. When rushed, it can underperform and disappoint. The lesson is simple and important. Even the Earth's deep heat asks to be treated with respect. Heat pumps move heat, making them renewable friendly even in winter. A heat pump sounds like it creates heat, but its magic is that it moves heat that already exists. Even cold outdoor air contains thermal energy, and the ground holds steady warmth below the frost line. A heat pump uses a refrigerant cycle to pull that heat from outside and deliver it indoors, like turning a small amount of electricity into a much larger amount of useful warmth. This is why heat pumps pair so beautifully with renewable electricity. When wind or solar supplies the grid, that clean power can be multiplied into home heating, reducing the need for burning fuel in boilers. In summer, the same system can run in reverse, carrying heat out of the house and providing cooling. The technology can feel almost like a cheat code for energy efficiency, especially in well-insulated buildings. It also changes the story of winter renewables. People sometimes imagine clean electricity is only for sunny afternoons. Heat pumps show how renewable power can stay practical when it is dark and cold, keeping homes comfortable with surprising grace. Shallow geothermal uses the steady temperature underground, not volcano heat. When people hear geothermal, they often picture geysers and lava. Shallow geothermal is quieter and more widely available. Just a few meters down, the ground temperature stays relatively steady through the year, cooler than summer air and warmer than winter air. That stability is valuable. Ground source heat pumps use buried loops filled with fluid to exchange heat with the earth, drawing warmth in winter and shedding warmth in summer. It is like using the planet as a giant thermal buffer. This can work in many climates and many neighborhoods, from suburban homes to schools and office buildings. The excitement is in the reliability. The ground does not have sudden cold snaps the way the air does. So performance can stay strong even during harsh weather. It also turns landscaping into infrastructure, and the lawns and parking lots, quiet pipes can be doing important work, invisible and steady. Shallow geothermal is a reminder that renewable energy is not always a dramatic monument on a horizon. Sometimes it is a calm design choice hidden under your feet. Some cities use geothermal networks to share heat between buildings. A city is full of wasted heat. Supermarkets throw off warmth from refrigeration systems. Offices build up heat from people and computers, and industrial sites often vent heat into the air. Geothermal networks can help cities treat heat like a shared resource, moving it where it is needed and storing it underground. In these systems, buildings connect to a loop of water that circulates through the neighborhood. Heat pumps in each building can draw warmth from the loop or push warmth into it, depending on the season and the building's needs. The ground acts as a stabilizer, smoothing temperature swings and giving the whole network a steady anchor. The effect can be surprisingly communal. A building that needs cooling can help supply heat to a building that needs warming, shifting energy around like a quiet marketplace. This is not the glamorous side of renewables, but it might be one of the most important for urban life. It is clean energy as infrastructure, tying neighbors together through invisible pipes and shared comfort. Ocean waves carry dense energy concentrated by winds across oceans. Waves look like simple rolling water, but they are really long-distance messengers from storms you may never see. Wind drags across the sea surface, transferring energy into ripples that grow into swells, then travel for days across entire ocean basins. By the time that swell reaches a coastline, it is carrying power that has been gathered and concentrated over enormous areas, like a conveyor belt delivering stored motion. That density is what makes wave energy so tempting. A small stretch of ocean can contain a surprising amount of usable energy compared with many land-based resources. The challenge is that the same ocean that offers power also tests every bolt and cable. Devices must convert an irregular shifting motion into smooth electricity while surviving salt, corrosion, and pounding waves. Still, the vision is captivating. Imagine coastal power stations that do not burn fuel or rely on clear skies, but instead sip energy from the ceaseless rise and fall of the sea, turning the rhythm of swells into a quiet electrical heartbeat. Tidal power is predictable centuries ahead because the moon keeps time. If you want a renewable source that arrives like clockwork, look to the tides. They're driven mostly by the moon's gravity, with the sun adding its own influence. And the dance is so regular that tidal patterns can be calculated far into the future. That predictability is rare in energy. It means operators can know with impressive confidence when the water will surge through a channel, when it will slacken, and when the next peak will return. In a world that often feels uncertain, a resource that keeps appointments is deeply appealing. Tidal systems can take different forms, from barges across estuaries to underwater turbines placed in fast-moving tidal streams. Each approach must respect marine ecosystems and navigation, because tides shape habitats and livelihoods. Yet the core wonder remains. The same celestial mechanics that guide eclipses and ocean rhythms can also guide electricity planning. It is renewable energy that is literally synchronized with the moon, turning orbital gravity into a schedule you can build a grid around. Ocean thermal energy uses warm surface and cold deep water differences. The ocean is layered like a giant heat reservoir. Sunlight warms the top waters while the deep ocean stays cold and dark, sometimes only a few degrees above freezing. Ocean thermal energy conversion tries to harvest that temperature difference, using it like a gentle engine. Warm surface water can help vaporize a working fluid. The vapor drives a turbine, and then cold, deep water condenses it back into liquid so the cycle can continue. The idea feels almost dreamy because it is so subtle. Instead of harnessing violent storms or crashing waves, it uses a quiet gradient that exists every day in tropical regions. It can also create intriguing side benefits, since the cold, deep water brought up can support air conditioning, aquaculture, or freshwater production, depending on the design. The hurdles are serious. Large pipes, marine engineering, and the expense of constructing durable offshore systems are all part of the challenge. Even so, the idea is captivating. It views the ocean not only as movement, but as stored heat, inviting us to imagine power plants that draw on the planet's slow, steady layers of temperature. Salinity gradient power can also extract energy where rivers meet the sea. At an estuary, fresh river water and salty ocean water come together, swirl, and blend. That mixing is more than chemistry. It represents a release of potential energy because the two waters carry different concentrations of dissolved salts. Salinity gradient power seeks to capture a portion of that energy using specialized membranes or electrochemical systems. One method relies on pressure osmosis, where fresh water naturally flows into salt water through a membrane, building pressure that can turn a turbine. Another uses reverse electrodialysis, stacking membranes that allow specific ions to pass, generating an electrical potential much like a natural battery. The attraction is that estuaries exist all over the world, and the fuel arrives continuously as long as rivers flow and tides bring salt water in. The challenge is making membranes durable, affordable, and resistant to fouling from organic matter. Even so, it is an astonishing idea. A place we think of as muddy and ordinary becomes an energy frontier where the simple act of mixing water can be turned into electricity, quietly and persistently. Marine energy devices must survive storms that destroy ships. Designing technology for the open ocean is like designing for a relentless test lab. Waves can lift and slam with tremendous force. Storms can change the sea surface into chaos, and salt water creeps into every weakness. Marine energy devices need to keep operating through rough conditions, or at least survive them intact. That means materials that resist corrosion, joints that can flex without failing, mooring systems that hold steady under strain, and electronics protected from moisture and bow fouling. Some devices are built to ride with the waves, absorbing energy like a floating muscle. Others try to stay submerged where the motion is calmer, or they can be locked down during extreme weather. Maintenance is its own adventure, often requiring specialized vessels and narrow weather windows to reach offshore sites safely. Yet, the payoff is a resource that is close to many coastal populations and can complement other renewables. There is something heroic about it. These machines are built not only to capture nature's power, but to endure nature's moods, returning day after day to the same pounding waters. Kelp farms can become bioenergy feedstocks while supporting marine life.
Kelp grows fast, reaching upward through the water like an underwater forest, and it does not need irrigation, fertilizer, or farmland. That makes it a fascinating candidate for bioenergy, because the ocean provides the growing space and nutrients. In kelp farms, long lines are suspended in coastal waters, and kelp fronds can be harvested and processed into fuels, biogas, or other products. What makes it especially intriguing is the ecological side. Kelp structures can provide habitat for fish and invertebrates, offering shelter and nursery space in areas that may otherwise be open water. The farms can also dampen wave energy and help buffer shorelines, depending on location and design. Turning kelp into energy is not a simple win. Harvesting, transport, and processing must be efficient, and the ecosystem impacts must be carefully managed to avoid harming local food webs. Still, the concept feels like a new chapter of renewable thinking.
It imagines energy crops that grow in the sea, adding life while producing fuel. And it hints at coastal economies that harvest sunlight indirectly through marine photosynthesis. Wave energy can pair naturally with offshore wind and undersea cables. Offshore wind projects already invest in the hardest part of marine renewables, building and connecting infrastructure in a challenging environment. Undersea cables bring power back to shore. Maintenance crews learn the sea's rhythms, and grid connections are established in coastal substations. Wave energy can potentially plug into that same ecosystem, sharing the pathway that electricity takes to reach land. There is also a resource pairing that makes the combination appealing. In many regions, wave conditions can remain energetic even when winds fluctuate locally, because waves often arrive from distant weather systems. That means wave devices might add a different kind of steadiness to an offshore renewable hub. The design possibilities are creative. Wave devices could be placed on the perimeters of wind farms, sometimes even helping reduce wave action inside the site, which could make access and maintenance easier. The vision is of an offshore power park, where the sea provides multiple energy streams, and the grid connection becomes a shared artery. It is a way of thinking that treats the ocean like a platform for layered solutions, rather than one technology at a time. Some tidal turbines look like underwater windmills turning with currents. In fast tidal channels, water can move with astonishing speed. And because water is denser than air, that motion carries a lot of power. Tidal stream turbines take advantage of this by using rotors that resemble wind turbines, but designed for an underwater world. They are anchored to the sea floor or mounted on structures, and they spin as currents rush past, generating electricity with each tidal pulse. The beauty is their invisibility. From the surface, the sea can look calm while powerful currents race below, and the turbines quietly do their work out of sight. Maintenance and installation are complex because the environment is harsh and access is limited by tides and weather. Wildlife interactions must also be monitored carefully, with designs and siting that reduce risk to marine animals.
Yet the appeal is clear. Unlike many resources that come and go unpredictably, tidal currents return with dependable rhythm. These machines turn that rhythm into electrons, creating power that arrives like a scheduled tide twice a day, every day, following the moon's quiet pull. The ocean holds vastly more heat than the air, shaping energy ideas. The ocean is Earth's great heat. It absorbs sunlight, stores warmth, and releases it slowly, which is one reason coastal climates can feel gentler than inland ones. Because water has a high heat capacity and the ocean is immense, it contains far more thermal energy than the atmosphere. That fact is more than trivia. It shapes how we think about renewable systems that use heat, from ocean thermal technologies to coastal heat exchange for buildings. It also explains why the ocean can buffer temperature swings even as it quietly takes on much of the excess heat from global warming. For energy thinkers, the ocean's heat storage is both an opportunity and a warning. It suggests huge reservoirs of energy gradients, but it also reminds us that the sea is already doing vital climate work. Any technology that taps ocean heat must be designed with great care to avoid disrupting local ecosystems. Still, the concept is awe-inspiring. It means that when you stand by the shore, you are near a gigantic thermal archive, a slow-moving library of heat that has been gathered day by day under the sun.
Coastal renewables can power desalination, turning sunlight into fresh water.
Freshwater scarcity can make energy feel like a secondary problem, because without water, cities and farms cannot function. Desalination offers a way to turn seawater into drinking water, but it is energy-intensive, which is why pairing it with renewables is so compelling. Coastal solar and wind can provide electricity for reverse osmosis systems, and the timing can even align. Sunny, hot periods often increase both solar output and water demand. In some designs, renewables can charge storage or drive desalination more intensely when power is plentiful, then ease off when the grid needs electricity elsewhere. This can help stabilize costs and reduce reliance on fossil fuels, especially in regions that currently burn oil or gas to keep desalination plants running. The engineering must also address brine disposal responsibly to protect marine ecosystems. Still, the vision is powerful.
It is not just clean electricity. It is clean electricity doing something deeply human, making safe water from the sea. It turns a coastline into a place where the sun and wind can help quench thirst, giving communities a renewable pathway to resilience. Biomass can be renewable, but only if regrowth and land use are smart. This is the renewable source that behaves like a promise. You take energy from living material, but you owe the landscape time and care in return. When forests are cleared faster than they recover, or when wild habitat is replaced with fuel crops, the climate math can flip the wrong way for years. Yet, when biomass is done thoughtfully, it can work beautifully. Think of sawmill leftovers, orchard prunings, or invasive plants removed for ecosystem health. Those materials already exist, and using them can replace fossil fuels without demanding new land. The real story is stewardship. A renewable label is not automatic. It is earned through how you harvest, how you replant, and what you choose to burn or convert. Biomass can be a bridge for industries that need heat, not just electricity, but only when the forest, the soil, and the biodiversity ledger all balance. Biogas captures methane from waste, turning a potent pollutant into power.
When food scraps, sewage, or manure break down without oxygen, microbes produce methane, a gas that traps heat strongly in the atmosphere. Biogas systems do something wonderfully practical with that problem. They seal the decay inside the digder or covered lagoon, capture the gas, and use it as fuel for heat, electricity, or upgraded pipeline quality gas. It is a transformation of a leak into a resource. The climate benefit comes from stopping methane from drifting away untreated, while also replacing fossil fuel use. The human benefits can be immediate too. Waste sites can smell less harsh, sanitation can improve, and farms can gain a steadier energy supply. The engineering has its own drama. Operators must keep microbes comfortable, manage temperature and acidity, and prevent foaming or clogging. When it works, it feels like a quiet magic trick. Yesterday's waste becomes tomorrow's light, and an invisible pollutant becomes a controlled, useful flame. Landfills can be tapped like energy wells using methane collection. A landfill is not a dead pile. Deep inside, trash continues to decompose for years, producing gas that seeps upward unless it is captured. Engineers can drill wells into the landfill and connect them with a network of pipes that pull the gas out under gentle suction, almost like harvesting air from underground. That gas can be burned in engines or turbines to make electricity, or refined and used as fuel. There is something oddly satisfying about it, because it treats pollution like a solvable engineering problem, not a vague guilt. It also improves safety, since unmanaged methane can create fire risks. The tricky part is variability. Landfill gas changes over time as waste ages, and it can contain impurities that need careful cleaning to protect equipment. Still, it is a compelling bridge strategy. While society works to reduce waste, existing landfills can be turned into temporary energy sources, capturing emissions that would otherwise drift into the sky. Anaerobic digesters can make gas from manure, reducing farm odors too. On many farms, manure is both valuable and challenging. It contains nutrients that can enrich soil, but it can also produce strong odor and release methane as it decomposes. Anaerobic digesters offer a different path. They collect manure in sealed tanks, where microbes break it down in controlled conditions, producing biogas that can be used for on-site power or heat. What comes out the other side is a stabilized material called digestate, which can be easier to handle and can still return nutrients to fields. The wow is how many problems can be softened at once. Odors can be reduced, pathogen levels lowered, and the farm gains a local stream of energy that does not rely on fuel deliveries. Some operations even reuse the heat from the generator to warm barns or power processing equipment. This turns a daily chore into a circular system where biology does the work and the farm becomes a small-scale energy producer. Algae can grow rapidly and produce oils without taking up prime farmland. These organisms are tiny factories living on sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. Certain strains create oily compounds that can be converted into fuels. The appeal lies in their speed and adaptability. Algae grow much faster than many land crops and can be cultivated in ponds or in closed reactors on land that is too salty, too dry, or too degraded for conventional farming. That means they do not need to compete directly with food production when managed carefully. They can also be integrated with waste streams, using nutrients from wastewater and capturing carbon from industrial exhaust in some systems. The real challenge lies in making the economics and engineering work together smoothly. Harvesting microscopic cells, extracting oils efficiently, and keeping cultures healthy at scale are big challenges. Still, the vision is a future where fuel feedstocks are grown like a watery garden in places we usually ignore, producing energy ingredients while leaving fertile fields for food. Biochar can lock carbon in soils while improving water retention. This one feels like a climate story with a gardening twist.
Biochar is a charcoal-like material made by heating biomass in low oxygen, a process that turns part of the plant carbon into a stable form that can persist in soils for a long time. Instead of that carbon returning quickly to the air, it can stay stored underground. Farmers and researchers also value biochar because it can change soil behavior. Its porous structure can help soils hold water and nutrients more effectively, which can be especially helpful in dry regions or degraded fields. It can also provide habitat for beneficial microbes, supporting healthier soil ecosystems. The magic is that it can be made from leftovers, like crop residues or forestry waste, turning materials that might be burned openly or left to rot into a soil amendment with long-term impact. Done responsibly, it becomes a rare kind of tool that can support both productivity and climate goals. Quietly working below the surface, some planes already fly on sustainable aviation fuels blended with jet fuel. Aviation is one of the hardest sectors to clean up because flight demands high energy in a lightweight package. That is why sustainable aviation fuels, often called SAF, are so interesting. They are designed to work in today's aircraft engines when blended with conventional jet fuel, which means the transition can begin without waiting for entirely new planes. These fuels can be made from different feedstocks depending on the pathway, including certain waste oils, residues, or other biological sources. And the goal is to reduce life cycle emissions compared with fossil fuel. The most fascinating part is how strict aviation requirements are. The fuel must perform reliably at high altitude in extreme cold and under intense engine conditions. Certification and testing are meticulous because safety is absolute. When a commercial flight uses SAF, it is a glimpse of a pragmatic route forward. Instead of asking aviation to stop, it asks aviation to change its inputs gradually, flight by flight. While bigger innovations continue to develop, waste cooking oil can become fuel, turning leftovers into locomotion. After a busy day in a restaurant kitchen, used cooking oil can look like pure waste, heavy and messy. Yet that same oil is still packed with energy. With the right processing, it can be turned into biodiesel or other renewable fuels that power trucks, buses, and generators. It is a wonderfully tangible idea because the feedstock is familiar. Fries today, fuel tomorrow. It also builds a local circular economy. Collection companies gather oil that might otherwise be dumped improperly, which protects waterways and sewers, and then refiners convert it into a cleaner burning fuel. The supply is limited, so it will not replace all petroleum, but it can make a real dent in specific fleets or regions. The narrative hook is transformation. Something you would never pull back into a pan becomes a refined product that meets engine standards and travels highways. It is renewable energy with a street-level origin story, where yesterday's dinner indirectly helps move tomorrow's goods. Turning forests into fuel can raise emissions for decades, a hidden trap. This is one of the most important uncomfortable truths in the renewable conversation. Trees store carbon for a long time, And forests do more than store carbon. They shelter biodiversity, regulate water, and protect soils. If a forest is cut and burned for energy, the carbon enters the atmosphere quickly, while regrowth can take decades to reabsorb it. During that time, the atmosphere is carrying an extra load, which undermines near-term climate goals. This is sometimes called a carbon debt, and it can be especially harmful if mature forests are treated as fuel simply because they are biomass. That does not mean all wood energy is wrong.
Using true residues that would decay anyway, or improving forest health by removing dangerous excess material. In some contexts can be very different. The trap is pretending all biomass is equal. Sustainable energy is not only about what you burn. It is about what you protect and how long the planet has to wait for payback. Advanced biofuels aim to use crop residues, not food crops. Imagine making fuel from the parts of agriculture that usually get left behind. Corn stalks, wheat straw, rice husks, and other residues contain energy-rich cellulose and hemicellulose. But turning them into liquid fuels requires breaking tough plant fibers down into usable prow molecules. That is the challenge advanced biofuels are trying to solve with enzymes, heat, catalysts, and clever chemistry. The appeal is clear. If fuels can come from leftovers instead of edible crops, it reduces pressure on food markets and avoids dedicating new land to energy farming.
It can also create new revenue streams for farmers while encouraging better management of residues, but might otherwise be burned in open fields. The caution is also clear. Soil needs organic matter, and removing too much residue can harm soil health. So, sustainable harvesting limits matter. When done carefully, advanced biofuels become a story of using what already exists, extracting more value from the same harvest, and turning the overlooked parts of plants into motion for trucks, ships, and air machines. Grids scale batteries, can smooth solar and wind, shifting energy by hours. A battery site is like a shock absorber for the grid. When the cloud passes over a solar farm or a wind front arrives early, the battery can respond in a blink, absorbing extra power or releasing it to fill a dip. That speed matters because electricity must match demand every second, not just on average. The most exciting part is how batteries change the daily story of clean energy. Sunshine often peaks at midday, while household demand tends to climb in the late afternoon and evening. A battery can quietly move that midday surplus into dinnertime light, turning a spiky supply into a smoother service people can rely on. These systems also support grid stability, helping control frequency and providing backup during faults. You can think of them as a new kind of infrastructure, more like a digital tool than a traditional power plant. They do not care where the electrons came from, only when they are needed. In a renewable world, timing becomes everything, and batteries are one of the most elegant ways to bend time. Pumped hydro storage stores more energy than most battery sites today. If batteries are like shock absorbers, pumped hydro is like a vast reservoir of patience. It can store huge amounts of energy for long stretches, not just for quick bursts. The concept feels almost too simple. Use excess electricity to lift water to a higher elevation, then release it later to generate power when demand rises. Because water and gravity scale so well, these facilities can hold an enormous amount of stored energy compared with many battery installations. They can support a grid through multi-hour peaks, cover unexpected outages, and help renewable-rich systems ride through weather patterns that last more than an evening. The engineering is also dramatic. Massive tunnels, reversible turbines, and carefully managed reservoirs work together like a silent machine hidden in the landscape.
It can even feel like a time capsule for electricity, storing last night's wind or yesterday's sunlight in the form of raised water. When you see it this way, the hills are not just scenery. They become part of a grid-scale energy bank built from rock, water, and gravity. Thermal storage can bank heat in rocks, salts, or even concrete. Not all storage has to be electrical.
Sometimes the smartest approach is to store energy as heat, because heat can be held cheaply in simple materials. Thermal storage takes advantage of that by warming up a medium like molten salts, stacked rocks, or specially designed concrete blocks, then using that stored heat later to do something useful. In power generation, it can drive steam turbines after the sun goes down. In buildings or industrial sites, it can deliver warmth hours later without turning on a boiler. The wonder is how ordinary the materials can be. Rock does not sound like advanced technology, yet a carefully engineered rock bed can hold tremendous thermal energy, releasing it slowly with controlled airflow. Concrete can be heated and cooled repeatedly, acting like a rechargeable heat brick. This kind of storage is a reminder that renewable energy is not always about rare materials or complex chemistry. Sometimes it is about physics you can feel with your hand, heat moving into a solid and waiting there, calm and ready until you ask for it back. Green hydrogen can store renewable energy for weeks or seasons. Some energy needs are short and sharp, but others stretch across weeks. That is where green hydrogen becomes especially intriguing. When renewable electricity is abundant, it can split water into hydrogen and oxygen through electrolysis. The hydrogen becomes a storable energy carrier that can be kept in tanks, underground caverns, or other storage systems, then used later to generate electricity, provide industrial heat, or serve as a pre-feedstock for chemicals. The magic is the timescale. Batteries are excellent for hours, sometimes days, but hydrogen can reach towards seasonal storage, helping cover long winter lulls or extended cloudy periods. It is not without cost. Turning electricity into hydrogen and then converting it back loses energy, and building safe systems requires careful engineering. Still, the potential is vast for heavy industry and long-duration resilience.
Hydrogen is like wind captured in a bottle or sunlight stored in physical form. It takes a brief moment of renewable surplus and transforms it into something you can store, move, and use later when the grid needs a deeper reserve. Vehicles can function as batteries, sending power back during times of peak demand. An electric vehicle is more than transportation. It is a large battery on wheels that sits parked most of the time. Vehicle-to-grid concepts turn that idle capacity into a resource. When the grid is under strain, a fleet of plugged-in cars could supply a small share of their stored energy to homes or local networks, then recharge later when electricity is cleaner or less expensive. What is surprising is how little each individual car needs to contribute to make a real difference.
A neighborhood filled with vehicles, each offering a modest amount, can add up to a flexible power plant without constructing a new smokestack. It also creates new forms of resilience. During an outage, a car can run essential loads, keeping lights on, refrigeration cold, or medical devices operating for a period of time. The main hurdles are practical battery wear, standardizing hardware, and designing incentives so owners feel protected and rewarded. Still, it is a thrilling concept. Transportation becomes part of the energy system, not just a customer of it. And the parked cars outside quietly become a grid asset. Smart appliances can shift demand quietly, like invisible energy choreography. A grid does not only need supply, it needs timing. Smart appliances help by adjusting when they run,
often without you noticing. A water heater can warm a tank earlier in the day when solar power is abundant. A dishwasher can start after midnight when demand is low. A home battery can charge during a windy night and discharge during the evening peak. The elegance is that comfort stays the same while the grid gets flexibility. Multiply that across thousands of homes and it starts to look like choreography. Millions of tiny decisions aligning to smooth out the energy system. This approach can reduce the need for expensive backup plants that run only a few hours per year. It can also make renewable energy feel more dependable because the system learns to bend demand around supply instead of fighting it. The challenge is trust and simplicity. People need devices that are secure, reliable, and easy to override. When done well, it feels like the gentlest kind of revolution. Not loud construction, but quiet coordination, where everyday appliances become partners in a cleaner grid. Transmission lines let sunny deserts power distant cities after sunset. One of the most powerful tricks in renewable energy is distance.
The sun does not set everywhere at once, and weather is rarely identical across a whole continent.
Transmission lines connect those differences, letting regions share what they have when they have it. A desert can produce huge solar output in late afternoon, then send that energy towards cities where demand is rising. Meanwhile, another region might be catching wind at night and sending power back when the desert goes dark. This is how grids become more resilient, by behaving less like isolated islands and more like a worked organism. Building new transmission is not trivial. It requires permits, community agreement, careful routing, and long-term planning. Yet it can unlock enormous value by reducing curtailment and making renewable power usable over a wider area. It also changes the map of energy. Places once considered remote become strategic, not because of oil wells, but because of sunlight and open space.
With strong transmission, geography turns into an advantage, and clean energy can travel farther than ever, arriving where people live and work. Microgrids can keep hospitals running when storms knock out main grids. When a storm hits, the grid can fail in minutes, but a hospital cannot pause. Microgrids are designed for exactly that moment. They are localized power systems that can disconnect from the main grid and operate independently using a mix of generation, storage, and intelligent controls. In a hospital, that can mean solar panels, batteries, and possibly other on-site resources working together to keep critical systems alive. Operating rooms, refrigeration for medicines, oxygen equipment, and communications. The beauty is not only in survival, but in smoothness. A well-designed microgrid can transition quickly, reducing the risk of damaging sensitive equipment during outages. It can also lower costs during normal times by using stored energy during peak prices, or by providing grid services. Microgrids turn resilience into something built, not hoped for. They make reliability feel local and intentional, like having a lighthouse that stays lit through the storm. When you think about energy as healthcare infrastructure, microgrids become more than engineering. They become peace of mind. Modern grids need flexibility as much as they need generation. For most of the last century, the grid was built around power plants that could be commanded like machines. Demand rose and supply followed. A renewable heavy grid flips that script. Supply is abundant but variable, so the grid must become more flexible, capable of balancing through many tools at once. Flexibility can come from storage, fast response power electronics, smarter forecasting, stronger transmission, and loads that can shift timing.
It also comes from market design and planning. because software and rules can be as important as wires. The fascinating thing is that this turns the grid into a living system. It is no longer just a pipeline for electricity. It is a responsive network that senses conditions and adjusts constantly. When flexibility is high, renewables can reach higher shares without sacrificing reliability. When flexibility is low, clean energy gets wasted through curtailment, or backup fossil plants stay on. The shift is psychological as well as technical. We stop thinking only about building more generation and start thinking about building a better grid, one that can dance with weather instead of resisting it. Demand response can be cheaper than building new power plants. Sometimes the cheapest energy is the energy you do not have to generate at all. Demand response is a way to reduce or shift electricity use during peak times. When the grid is strained and power is most expensive, instead of constructing a new power plant that might run only a handful of hours per year, utilities can pay businesses or households to temporarily lower demand. A factory might pause a non-critical process for an hour. A building might adjust its cooling slightly. A fleet of water heaters might cycle gently, barely noticeable to residents. The grid gets relief, and customers get rewarded. The fascinating part is how small changes add up. A tiny adjustment across many participants can replace a large chunk of peak capacity. Demand response also helps integrate renewables by aligning consumption with times of abundant clean power. It is a reminder that energy systems are not only about supply, they are about choices, habits, and coordination. When demand becomes flexible, the grid becomes less fragile, and clean energy becomes easier to welcome. Renewables can cut water use since many fossil plants need heavy cooling.
Electricity can be surprisingly thirsty. Many traditional power plants boil water to make steam, then must cool that steam back down, often withdrawing huge volumes from rivers, lakes, or the sea. In hot weather, when water is already stressed and ecosystems are vulnerable, that cooling demand can collide with human needs. Renewable sources like wind and solar photovoltaics sidestep much of that problem because they do not rely on constant steam cycles for generation. That means less competition for water during droughts and heat waves, and fewer warm water discharges that can stress aquatic life. The benefit can be easy to miss because it is invisible. You do not see the water that never had to be pumped, treated, or returned. Yet it matters deeply in dry regions where water is as strategic as electricity. Clean energy can be a water strategy as much as a climate strategy.
Easing pressure on reservoirs, protecting rivers, and helping communities keep more water available for drinking and farming. Air pollution drops quickly when coal is replaced by wind and solar. One of the most striking things about cleaning up the grid is how fast the air can respond. Coal combustion releases a mix of pollutants that form haze and fine particles. And those particles can travel through neighborhoods and into lungs within hours. When coal plants run less because wind and solar are supplying more electricity, the reduction in local pollution can be rapid, especially around major power stations. You can sometimes see it in clearer skylines and feel it in fewer scratchy throats, even if the change is subtle day to day. The deeper impact shows up in health outcomes over time. Fewer asthma flare-ups, fewer hospital visits, and fewer days when vulnerable people are told to stay indoors. What makes this so compelling is the immediacy. Climate benefits can feel abstract because they unfold over decades. Cleaner air is often felt now. It reframes renewable energy as something that protects the present, not just the future.
Each megawatt of clean generation is not only an engineering choice, it is a quieter street, a clearer breath, and a healthier morning for communities downwind. Clean energy reduces fuel price shocks because sunshine has no cartel. Fossil fuels are traded commodities, and that means their prices can swing with wars, shipping disruptions, political decisions, and market panic. Those swings can appear on household bills with an unpleasant surprise, even for people who never changed their behavior. Renewable energy changes the rules because the main input is not something you buy on a global market. The sun does not raise its price during a crisis. The wind does not get embargoed. Once a solar farm or wind project is built, much of its cost is locked in.
And that stability can protect consumers from sudden spikes. This also reshapes national security in a quiet way. Countries that import large amounts of fuel can reduce vulnerability by relying more on local renewable resources. Of course, renewables still depend on supply chains for equipment, and grids still require investment. But the day-to-day operation is less hostage to global fuel drama. It is a kind of economic calm built into physics. When your energy is delivered by weather rather than tankers, the world's shocks have a harder time reaching your light switch. Community solar lets renters benefit without owning a roof. Not everyone has a roof they can use. Renters, apartment residents, and people with shaded hose can be shut out of rooftop solar even if they want to participate. Community solar was invented to solve that fairness problem.
A shared solar project is built in one location, and people subscribe to a portion of its output, receiving credits on their electricity bills as if the panels were theirs. It turns clean energy into something you can join, not something you must own property to access. The feeling is powerful. A family in a small apartment can still help drive new renewable construction. A school district can subscribe and stabilize energy costs. A community group can organize subscriptions that prioritize local benefits. It also builds local pride because the project is visible and collective, not hidden behind private fences. The key is good policy and transparent billing, so people trust the savings. When it works well, it is one of the gentlest pathways into the energy transition, letting more people step in without needing perfect circumstances, and making clean power feel like a community immunity rather than an appeal. Exclusive upgrade in some regions.
Renewable curtailment happens because too much power arrives.
It sounds like a problem from a future we once dreamed about. Too much clean electricity. Curtailment is when wind or solar output is reduced not because the resource failed, but because the grid cannot use or move all the energy at that moment. This can happen when transmission is limited, when demand is low, or when other generators cannot ramp down quickly enough. While it can feel wasteful, it is also a sign of success, showing that renewable capacity is large enough to sometimes exceed local needs. Curtailment pushes the next wave of innovation. It encourages more storage, stronger transmission, smarter demand shifting, and flexible industry that can run when power is plentiful. It also invites new ideas, like producing hydrogen or charging fleets during surplus hours. The fascinating part is the shift in mindset. Instead of asking, "Do we have enough energy?" the grid starts asking, "Do we have enough flexibility?"
Curtailment is not the end of the story. It is the grid revealing where to evolve next. Recycling solar panels into turbine blades is a fast-growing engineering frontier. Renewable energy is built to last, but nothing lasts forever.
As early generations of panels and blades age out, the question becomes what to do with the materials. This is where a new frontier has emerged, blending chemistry, design, and circular economy thinking. Solar panels are made of glass, aluminum frames, and valuable metals that can be recovered when recycling is done well. Turbine blades are more challenging, often built from strong composite materials that do not melt and reprocess as easily as metals. Engineers are working on ways to break composites into reusable fibers, turn old blades into structural products, or redesign materials so they are easier to recycle from the beginning. This goes beyond reducing waste.
It cuts the need for new extraction, lowers full life cycle impacts, and helps the renewable transition feel whole and finished. There is a quiet elegance in this idea. The same industries that built the clean energy era now have the opportunity to shape its second chapter, where end of life becomes a fresh start, and tomorrow's turbines and panels are partly made from yesterday's. Rare earth metals are not always necessary for wind turbines. People often worry that clean energy depends on scarce materials, and there is some truth in that concern. But wind power has more flexibility than many assume. Some turbine generators use rare earth magnets for high efficiency and compact size, especially in certain direct drive designs. Yet many turbines operate perfectly well with other generator types that rely on more common materials. The choice depends on cost, design philosophy, supply chain strategy, and maintenance preferences. This is important because it means wind energy is not locked into a single resource bottleneck. Manufacturers can adapt, and countries can diversify technologies based on their own industrial strengths. It also shows how engineering is full of trade-offs, not commandments. You can pursue simpler gearboxes, different generator architectures, and alternative materials depending on what the project values most. The deeper fascination is that the wind itself does not care what metal you choose. The atmosphere offers energy freely, and humans are still refining the best ways to harvest it with whatever materials make sense. That adaptability is part of why wind has spread so quickly across the world. Supply chains can be cleaner too, using renewable-powered manufacturing. It is easy to imagine renewable energy as only what happens when the equipment is installed. But there is a quieter story upstream in factories and furnaces where the equipment is made. Manufacturing steel, glass, aluminum, and chemicals can be energy-intensive, and the electricity used there shapes the footprint of the final product. As grids get cleaner and factories adopt their own renewable power, the entire supply chain starts to lighten. A solar panel made in a region with clean electricity can have a lower embedded impact than one made where coal dominates. The same goes for battery production, metal refining, and component manufacturing. Companies are beginning to track this more carefully because customers and governments increasingly ask not only what a product does, but how it was made. This creates a beautiful feedback loop. Renewables help clean manufacturing, and cleaner manufacturing helps build more renewables with lower impact. The transition becomes self-reinforcing. It is not just switching fuels at the power plant. It is cleaning the industrial bloodstream that produces the tools of modern life. So the story of clean energy is cleaner from start to finish. Mining impacts matter. So clean energy still demands responsible sourcing. Renewables reduce air pollution and climate emissions, but they still require materials, and those materials come from somewhere. Mining can bring habitat disruption, water pollution, labor exploitation, and conflict
if it is poorly governed. Pretending clean energy has no footprint is not honest. And honesty is what leads to better solutions. Responsible sourcing means stronger environmental standards, safer working conditions, transparency about where materials originate, and recycling systems that reduce the need for new extraction. It also means smarter design, using less material, substituting abundant elements where possible, and building products that can be repaired and reused. This is the real maturity of the energy transition. It is not only about replacing smokestacks,
It is about building a new system without repeating old harms in a new form.
the hopeful path is that these impacts are visible and solvable through policy, technology, and pressure from informed consumers. Clean energy can be cleaner still, but only if we care about the whole chain, from the mine to the wire to the finished machine. Energy efficiency is the quiet twin of renewables, shrinking what we must generate. There is a thrilling side of renewables, big turbines and shimmering solar fields. But efficiency is the quiet hero that makes those projects go farther. When buildings are well insulated, when LED lighting replaces older bulbs, when motors and appliances are designed to waste less, the same comfort and productivity require less electricity. That means fewer power plants of any kind, fewer transmission upgrades, and less strain during extreme weather. Efficiency also makes renewables easier to integrate because demand peaks become smaller and smoother.
The most interesting thing about efficiency is that it is often invisible.
You do not feel insulation working. You do not hear a high-efficiency motor saving power. Yet the savings accumulate every hour, quietly reducing costs and emissions. It is like tightening a leaky system, so every drop counts. In many cases, efficiency upgrades pay back quickly through lower bills, which makes them a practical first step in the energy transition. Renewables change where energy comes from. Efficiency changes how much we need in the first place. And that partnership is one of the most powerful combinations on Earth. Heat pumps can deliver multiple units of heat per unit of electricity. It sounds like a trick until you picture what is really happening. A heat pump is not making heat from scratch the way a toaster does. It is moving heat, gathering low-grade warmth from outdoor air or the ground, and concentrating it indoors. Because of that, a single unit of electricity can drive the transfer of several units of usable heat. The result is a kind of energy multiplication that feels almost unfair, especially in well-insulated homes where the heat you deliver stays put. Modern systems can work in surprisingly cold climates using clever refrigerants, variable speed compressors, and smart controls that adjust smoothly instead of cycling harshly. This makes heat pumps a perfect partner for renewable electricity. When wind is strong at night or solar is abundant during the day, that clean power can be turned into comfort with impressive efficiency. It also changes the sound of winter. Instead of a furnace igniting in bursts, you get a steady, gentle warmth, as if the house is quietly borrowing heat from the world outside. Induction stoves can cut indoor pollution compared with burning gas. Cooking is one of the most intimate energy uses in a home, happening right where people breathe. Gas stoves release combustion byproducts directly into kitchens, including nitrogen dioxide and tiny particles, especially when ventilation is weak. Induction cooking sidesteps that because it does not burn anything. It uses an electromagnetic field to heat the pot itself, meaning the pan becomes the heat source, while the surrounding air stays cleaner. The experience is also surprisingly responsive. Water can boil quickly, heat changes feel immediate, and the stovetop surface often stays cooler than traditional electric coils, because it is not the main thing being heated. For families, this can mean a calmer kitchen with less lingering odor and fewer invisible irritants. It can also mean safer cooking for small children, since spills are less likely to bake onto a scorching surface. Induction is not just a gadget upgrade.
It is a quiet shift in indoor environment, turning the kitchen from a tiny combustion site into a cleaner, more controllable workspace that pairs naturally with renewable electricity. Electric buses can use regenerative braking, recapturing energy at stops. City buses are always stopping, always starting. And that stop-and-go pattern can waste enormous energy in traditional vehicles as heat from braking. Electric buses can turn that waste into a return. When the driver brakes, the motor can act like a generator, converting motion back into electricity and sending it into the battery. Each stop becomes a small recharge, which is beautifully suited to routes full of traffic lights and passenger pickups. The benefits ripple outward. Less brake wear can mean lower maintenance and fewer brake dust particles in the air. The ride can feel smoother too, because regenerative braking can be controlled with precision rather than relying only on friction. For transit agencies, the energy savings can make routes more efficient and predictable. The bigger story is how cities sound and smell. Electric buses can be quieter at low speeds and free of tailpipe fumes at the curb where people wait. When powered by clean electricity, a daily commute becomes part of the renewable transition, one stop at a time, turning the rhythm of urban movement into an energy recovery system. Green steel can be made using hydrogen instead of coal. Steel is the skeleton of modern life, but traditional steelmaking often relies on coal-derived carbon to pull oxygen out of iron ore, releasing large amounts of carbon dioxide in the process. Green steel proposes a different chemistry. Use hydrogen as the reducing agent instead, so the main byproduct becomes water vapor rather than carbon emissions. It is a stunning shift because it changes one of the most foundational industrial reactions on Earth. The challenge is scale and cost. Hydrogen must be produced cleanly, reliably, and in huge quantities. Asterisk and steel plants must be redesigned or retrofitted to handle new processes safely. But the promise is enormous. Bridges, rail lines, cars, and buildings could be built with dramatically lower climate impact. It also creates a new kind of industrial ecosystem. Renewable electricity makes hydrogen. Hydrogen helps make steel. And cleaner steel helps build more renewable infrastructure. There is a sense of the future in it. The same material that built the fossil era could help build the post-fossil era, not by disappearing, but by changing how it is born. Some cement plants use electrified kilns and captured carbon to cut emissions. Cement is everywhere, yet its climate impact is often invisible to the people walking on sidewalks. Emissions come from two places: the heat needed to run kilns, and the chemical reaction that releases carbon dioxide when limestone becomes clinker. New approaches aim at both problems. Electrified kilns could replace fossil flames with renewable-powered heat, especially as high-temperature industrial electrification improves. At the same time, carbon capture systems can trap carbon dioxide from kiln exhaust, preventing it from entering the atmosphere and potentially sending it for storage or use in new materials. There are also alternative cement chemistries and additives
that reduce the amount of trinker needed in the first place, making each ton less polluting. The fascination here is that it is not one silver bullet. It is a bundle of strategies working together, like redesigning a recipe while also changing the oven. If successful, it means the buildings of the future can be built with less hidden climate cost. The concrete under our feet could become part of the solution, not just part of the problem. Renewable power, desalination, can turn some and wind into drinking water.
When you live near the ocean, it can feel cruel to be thirsty with all that water nearby.
Desalination offers a path, but it traditionally comes with heavy energy demands. Pairing desalination with renewables changes the feel of the whole system. Instead of burning fuel to force water through membranes, coastal wind and solar can supply the power, making fresh water with a smaller climate footprint. It also opens creative operating styles. Plants can run harder when renewable power is abundant, storing water in reservoirs or tanks for later use, and easing off when the grid is tight. That flexibility can help both water management and energy management, especially in sunny coastal regions where demand rises with heat. The key is doing it responsibly, because brine must be handled in ways that protect marine ecosystems. When designed well, it becomes an elegant loop. Sunshine and sea breeze become electricity. Electricity becomes fresh water.
And fresh water supports communities that might otherwise face severe scarcity.
It is one of the most human uses of clean power, turning renewable energy into something you can drink. Agrivoltaics lets crops grow under panels, balancing shade and yield. There is a gentle surprise hidden in the idea of farming under solar panels. Plants do not always want full, intense sunlight all day. In hot climates, too much sun can stress crops, dry soil faster, and increase irrigation needs. Agravix places panels above fields with enough spacing and height to allow farming below, creating a pattern of moving shade that can protect certain crops from midday heat. The panels generate electricity while the land continues to produce food, which helps ease the fear that renewables must replace agriculture. The microclimate can change in interesting ways.
Shade can lower leaf temperatures, reduce evaporation, and in some cases, extend the growing season for crops that prefer cooler conditions.
Farmers can also gain a second income stream from electricity, which can stabilize finances when weather or markets are unpredictable. The magic is coexistence. Instead of making energy and food compete, Agriala invites them to cooperate, turning a field into a shared space where photons do double duty. Solar can power irrigation, reducing diesel use in rural farming. In many rural areas, irrigation depends on diesel pumps, which can be expensive, noisy, and vulnerable to fuel shortages. Solar-powered irrigation changes that dynamic by letting farms draw energy directly from the sun, often right where the water is needed. During bright hours, panels can drive pumps that lift groundwater or move water through canals, aligning naturally with the times when crops are most thirsty and evaporation is highest.
This can reduce operating costs and cut air pollution in farming communities.
It can also bring a kind of independence. Instead of planning around fuel deliveries, farmers plan around sunlight and water availability. Some systems include storage or hybrid designs, so pumping can continue when light fades. But even without that, the daytime pumping can be a major improvement. The deeper story is how energy access shapes agriculture. Reliable pumping can mean higher yields, more stable incomes, and better food security. Solar irrigation is renewable energy in its most practical form, not an abstract grid concept, but a direct support for the everyday work that feeds people. Clean power can make synthetic fuels by combining hydrogen and captured carbon. Some machines are hard to electrify directly, especially long-haul ships. Certain industrial processes and parts of aviation, synthetic fuels offer another route.
Use renewable electricity to produce hydrogen. Then combine that hydrogen with captured carbon dioxide to create liquid fuels that can work in existing engines. The chemistry can produce fuels like synthetic kerosene or methanol, depending on the pathway. The concept is fascinating because it treats carbon dioxide not only as waste, but as an ingredient pulled from industrial streams or even the air and then reused. It is not simple. Capturing carbon, producing hydrogen, and synthesizing fuels requires energy, and efficiency losses mean these fuels should be reserved for uses where direct electrification is difficult. Yet the promise is powerful for a transition period, because it can decarbonize parts of the economy without waiting for every engine and every tank to be replaced. It is like turning renewable electricity into a liquid form, a kind of stored sunshine that can travel across oceans and power heavy work. If done with genuine captured carbon and clean hydrogen, it becomes a bridge between today's infrastructure and tomorrow's clean energy system. District energy can share heat like a neighborhood-scale bloodstream. Most buildings make and waste heat in isolation, like each one living on its own island. District energy connects them. A network of insulated pipes carries hot water, steam, or chilled water between buildings and central energy sources, allowing heat to be produced efficiently and shared where it is needed. This can unlock surprising efficiencies. Waste heat from data centers, industry, or refrigeration can be captured and distributed. Large heat pumps can supply many buildings at the same time, running more efficiently than countless smaller units spread everywhere. Thermal storage can also be integrated, letting the system store heat or coolness and deliver it later when needed.
The outcome can be reduced costs,
Lower emissions, and greater resilience, since a network can redirect energy if one part fails. The imagery feels almost biological. A neighborhood becomes an organism, circulating warmth the way a body moves blood, keeping spaces comfortable with less waste. When combined with renewable electricity or geothermal sources, district energy can transform entire blocks into a coordinated, low-carbon comfort system, quietly improving how cities breathe. The first renewable revolution was simply the use of water wheels and windmills. Long before wires and engines, people already understood how to borrow power from the world around them. A wheel turning in a stream could grind grain, cut timber, or pump water, easing a village's daily labor and making it more dependable. Windmills did the same on open plains and coasts, capturing moving air to mill flour and drain wetlands. What makes this feel like a revolution is that it was not about discovering a new resource. It was about discovering leverage. Instead of muscles doing repetitive work, nature's motion did it continuously. These machines also trained humanity to think in systems: water management, gearing, maintenance, and sharing a resource fairly in a quiet way. They were the ancestors of today's grids. Renewable energy can feel modern, but its roots are ancient. The earliest chapters were written in wood, stone, and clever mechanics,
proving that clean power is not a sudden invention. It is an old relationship renewed again and again with better tools. Early ships used wind power for global trade long before engines. Long-distance trade once depended on understanding the sky as well as the sea. Sailors learned seasonal winds, ocean currents, and the patterns of monsoons, timing voyages around nature's schedule. A ship's sails were not just fabric, they were energy collectors, turning the atmosphere's motion into thrust that could carry spices, metals, textiles, and stories between continents. This is renewable energy in one of its most world-shaping forms, because wind-powered shipping helped connect cultures, spread ideas, and build early global economies. It also demanded sophisticated navigation and risk management, because nature's generosity could become nature's danger in a storm. The wonder is that the same wind that whistles past your window once moved entire civilizations' supply chains. Today, there is renewed interest in modern sailing assistance for shipping, not as nostalgia, but as engineering, using wing sails, kites, and route optimization. It is a reminder that clean power is not new to transportation. It is part of our oldest adventures. Some islands now chase 100% renewables to escape fuel imports. On an island, energy dependence can feel like a constant tax on daily life. Fuel arrives by ship. Prices can spike without warning, and storms can interrupt deliveries when power is needed most. That is why many islands are becoming laboratories for renewable systems. When sunlight, wind, and sometimes geothermal resources are paired with storage and smart controls, an island can begin to produce its own power locally, reducing the vulnerability that comes with imported fuel. The transition can also reshape local economies. Money that once left the island to buy diesel can circulate at home, supporting technicians, maintenance crews, and community-owned projects. Islands also tend to have clear boundaries and simpler grids, which makes them ideal places to test microgrids, advanced forecasting, and new storage strategies. The story is not always easy, because equipment must withstand salt air and strong storms. Yet the motivation is powerful and personal. Energy independence on an island is not just an environmental goal. It is freedom from uncertainty, built from sunrises, sea breezes, and thoughtful planning. Renewables can strengthen energy independence for countries without oil reserves. For many nations, energy policy has long been shaped by geology that cannot be changed. If you do not have large oil or gas reserves, you must import fuel, and that can influence budgets, diplomacy, and security. Renewables offer a different path, because the reserves are not buried underground. They are spread across landscapes and coastlines as sun, wind, and flowing water. When a country builds more renewable capacity, it can reduce its exposure to global fuel markets and shipping disruptions. That shift can be economically stabilizing, especially for countries where fuel imports drain foreign currency reserves. It can also encourage domestic industry, from manufacturing components to training a skilled workforce. Independence does not mean isolation, because grids still trade and supply chains still exist. But it does mean a greater ability to meet basic energy needs with resources that arrive daily and locally. The deeper fascination is how this reshapes power in the world. In a renewable, heavy future, advantage is not limited to places with oil fields. It belongs to places that can plan, build, maintain, and coordinate their natural energy flows effectively. Electrifying everything makes renewables more powerful than just electricity generation. Renewables become truly transformative when electricity stops being a single category and starts being the common language of energy. When vehicles, building heat, and some industrial processes shift from direct fuel burning to electricity, every new wind farm or solar plant can replace emissions in more than one sector. This is why electrification is often the hidden strategy behind renewable success. Electric motors are efficient, so the same energy input can move more work. Heat pumps can deliver warmth far more effectively than resistive heating. Electric transit can reduce urban noise and local fumes, while also becoming easier to power cleanly over time. Electrification also creates new flexibility. Charging can be scheduled, heating can be stored in building thermal mass, and systems can respond to grid conditions. The fascinating twist is that clean electricity is not just cleaner, it can be more controllable. Once energy is in electrical form, it can be measured, optimized, and coordinated with precision. Renewables are the supply side, but electrification is the amplifier that lets that clean supply reach deeper into everyday life. Heat, transport, and industry together make renewables a full system story. It is tempting to think renewable energy is simply about replacing one power plant with another. But the real drama is bigger. Heat is a huge share of energy use, from homes to factories, and changing how heat is made can reduce emissions faster than many people expect. Transport is another giant, and it spans everything from bicycles to freight ships. Industry adds its own complexity, needing high temperatures and chemical feedstocks that electricity alone cannot always provide. When these sectors are considered together, renewables stop being a niche solution and become the backbone of a new system. You start to see how pieces connect. Clean electricity can power heat pumps, charge vehicles, and make hydrogen for steel or chemicals. Efficiency reduces the amount of generation needed. Storage and grids link it all. This is why the transition is not just technical, it is architectural. It redesigns the way energy moves through society. Like reorganizing a city's roads, plumbing, and communications all at once. The full system view is where renewable energy becomes truly awe-inspiring, because it shows how a cleaner future is built through coordination, not just invention. New building codes can turn cities into huge efficiency and solar projects. A building code can sound boring, but it can quietly reshape an entire city's energy destiny. When codes require better insulation, airtight construction, efficient windows, and modern heating and cooling systems, every new building becomes easier to power cleanly for decades. Some codes also encourage or require wiring that supports heat pumps, electric vehicle charging, and rooftop solar, making clean upgrades simpler later. Over time, this creates a compounding effect. Instead of retrofitting everything at great expense, the city grows in a cleaner direction by default. The most fascinating part is how invisible the change can be. A well-insulated wall does not announce itself. A properly sealed building does not create headlines.
Yet these choices can reduce peak demand, lower bills, and make renewable integration much easier. Codes can also improve comfort, keeping indoor temperatures steadier and reducing drafts and humidity problems. When you zoom out, a city becomes a long-term project, and building codes become the quiet pen that writes its energy future. They can turn millions of square meters into a coordinated efficiency machine, ready to be powered by sun and wind.
Energy storage costs have fallen sharply, changing what grids can do. There was a time when storing electricity at large scale felt like a luxury. Then costs began falling, driven by manufacturing scale, improved chemistries, and global demand from electronics and vehicles. As storage becomes more affordable, it changes the grid's personality. Solar and wind stop being limited to when the weather allows and start becoming resources that can be shifted into evenings, early mornings, or emergency moments.
Storage can also provide fast grid services, smoothing frequency and reducing the need to keep fossil plants idling as insurance. The exciting part is that storage invites creativity. Different durations and technologies can be matched to different needs, from short bursts for stability to longer storage for shifting energy across the day. It also changes planning. Instead of building a new gas peaker for rare peaks, a utility might have batteries near a substation and solve congestion, reliability, and capacity all at once. Falling storage costs do not solve every challenge, but they open doors that used to be locked. They make a high renewables grid feel less like a fragile balancing act and more like a robust system with options. The fastest path to cleaner air is often local renewable deployment. Big national plans matter, but air quality is lived locally. A neighborhood downwind of a polluting plant does not experience emissions as a global average. It experiences them as a daily reality. Deploying renewables close to where dirty generation is displaced can bring quick improvements, especially when paired with retiring or reducing high-emitting sources. Local renewables can also reduce the need to run older, dirtier peaking units that operate during hot afternoons or cold snaps, precisely when air can already be strained. The story becomes even more powerful when clean power supports electrification of buses, buildings, and nearby industry, cutting pollution from multiple directions in the same region. Communities can also shape projects more directly when they are local, influencing siting, benefits, and ownership. The fascination is the immediacy. Clean air is not only a future promise, it can arrive within seasons when the right projects come online and the grid's dispatch changes. Local renewable deployment turns the energy transition into something you can taste and breathe, making the benefits personal and close, not distant and abstract. The renewable transition is already reshaping geopolitics, jobs, and daily life. Energy has always shaped the world's alliances and conflicts because it determines who has power, literally and politically. As renewables expand, that landscape begins to shift. Countries rich in sunlight and wind can become energy exporters through electricity, hydrogen, or renewable-based products, while nations built around fossil exports face pressure to adapt. Supply chains for clean technologies create new strategic dependencies, pushing governments to think about minerals, manufacturing, and recycling in a more serious way. At the same time, the transition reaches down into ordinary life. People notice quieter streets with electric buses, new job paths in installation and maintenance, and homes that can be warmed or cooled with cleaner electricity. Businesses adjust as well, looking for steady energy costs and cleaner identities. This transition is not a single event. It is an ongoing rewrite of how energy is generated, exchanged, and consumed. The ripple effects spread everywhere, from industrial strategy to household budgeting. What makes it most intriguing is that it is unfolding while the old system is still operating. Society, then, is living in a hybrid era. That is what makes this moment so uniquely alive, a rare stretch of time when the rules of energy are being reshaped
in real time. As we reach the close of this gentle journey, it can help to notice how broad and quiet the story of renewable energy truly is.
We have drifted through sunlight, settling on rooftops and deserts, through winds brushing coastlines and open plains, through rivers, tides, heat beneath the earth, and thoughtful systems that learn to listen to nature rather than overpower it. Together, these ideas create a calm image of a world learning to move in rhythm with itself, borrowing energy without burning, sharing warmth, light, and motion with a little more care. If your mind is still awake, you may enjoy letting these images settle. Imagine panels resting in soft evening light, turbines turning slowly against the sky, water flowing through hidden channels, and cities humming more quietly as energy becomes cleaner and more patient. None of it needs to rush. The transition unfolds step by step, just as night does, gradually dimming the sharp edges of the day. If you've enjoyed spending this time here, you're always welcome to continue the journey. Another gentle video will be waiting on the screen, ready to carry your thoughts a little further if sleep hasn't arrived yet. And if you'd like to support these calm explorations, a like, a subscription, or a quiet comment can help this space grow and find others who need it. But for now, there's nothing left to learn or remember. Let the facts fade into feeling. Allow your breathing to slow, your shoulders to soften, and your thoughts to loosen their grip. The world outside will keep turning, the wind will keep blowing, and the sun will rise again when it's time. Sleep well, and good night.